For 3 decades, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was the beating heart of American late-night television. Millions tuned in every night to watch Johnny charm, laugh, and disarm even the most difficult guests with his legendary ease. But behind the laughter, there were moments that shocked audiences, moments when a guest crossed a line so boldly that even Carson himself struggled to hide his discomfort. These weren't scripted jokes or harmless slip-ups. They were tense, uncomfortable exchanges that left the studio silent and viewers stunned at home. As cultural attitudes shifted across the decades, a handful of guests made remarks or behaved in ways that today would be completely unacceptable. Comments rooted in outdated stereotypes, insensitive jokes, or outright offensive beliefs. Johnny Carson, known for keeping the show smooth and controlled, occasionally found himself forced to react in real time, diffusing tension with humor, while silently revealing just how uncomfortable he truly was. These moments, rarely replayed and often buried in old archives, remain some of the most talked about controversies in the show's history. They serve as reminders of how much society has changed and how difficult live television can become. When a guest decides to ignore the boundaries of decency. Today, we revisit 7 of the most shocking, offensive, and culturally insensitive appearances ever to hit Carson's stage. These segments didn't just push the limits, they created headlines, sparked backlash, and left lasting marks on the show's legacy. What happened, why it caused outrage, and how Johnny handled each situation reveals a side of the talk show king that fans rarely got to see. When people look back at Johnny Carson's legendary run on The Tonight Show, they often remember the charm, the laughter, and the smooth rhythm that defined late-night television for over 30 years. But not every moment was effortless. Occasionally, a guest walked onto that stage and delivered comments that were so tone-deaf, so outdated, or so culturally insensitive that the studio atmosphere changed instantly. Johnny, known for keeping a calm, controlled environment, had to think quickly, using humor or subtle redirection to prevent the show from derailing. These were moments that today would generate instant outrage, and they remain some of the most uncomfortable clips in late-night history. One of the earliest controversies came from a comedian whose entire act centered around shock value. During his appearance, he delivered a series of jokes aimed at various racial groups, material that audiences at the time may have let slide. But Johnny clearly didn't. As soon as the guest launched into his routine, the studio laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. Johnny shifted in his seat, his expression tightening just slightly, revealing how caught off guard he was. Rather than confront the comedian directly, he used gentle humor to pivot the conversation towards safer ground. But the damage was done. Viewers later wrote letters criticizing the guest's performance, calling it outdated and uncomfortable. Carson never invited him back, and the episode became a reminder that not all comedy ages well, and sometimes the host's job is to quietly protect the integrity of the show. Another uncomfortable moment unfolded when a well-known actor came on the show to promote a new film. Within minutes of sitting down, he made remarks that leaned heavily on racial stereotypes, comments he brushed off as harmless fun. But Johnny didn't laugh. His smile tightened, and he responded with a dry remark that gently highlighted how inappropriate the statements were. The studio audience reacted with scattered, uncertain laughter. This moment was especially striking because the actor wasn't known for controversy. His remarks appeared to come from a place of ignorance rather than malice. But ignorance can be just as harmful. The scene quickly went viral in newspapers the next day, with columnists criticizing the actor's outdated perspective. Carson, however, handled the situation with his signature professionalism, steering the conversation back to the movie while subtly signaling that the guest had crossed a line. These early examples showcase the delicate balancing act Johnny Carson was forced into, maintaining a calm, entertaining show while managing guests who brought views that were already considered questionable. Even at the time, while the show was built on humor and lightheartedness, moments like these revealed a deeper truth. Live television often exposes people exactly as they are, and not everyone is prepared for that level of transparency. In the decades since, these appearances have become case studies of how not to behave on a public stage. They remind audiences that what may have once been dismissed as jokes or just comments can, in reality, reflect the deeper cultural biases of the era. Johnny Carson, a master of timing and tone, navigated these tensions with a subtle skill few hosts could match. As The Tonight Show moved into the late 1970s and early 1980s, America was changing. Social awareness was growing, audiences were becoming more vocal, and the tolerance for offensive or stereotypical humor was shrinking fast. Johnny Carson, always aware of public sentiment, worked hard to keep the show grounded in good-natured fun. But not every guest arrived with that same sensitivity. Some carried outdated views into a new era, and when those views slipped into the conversation, the tension inside the studio was impossible to ignore. One particularly uncomfortable evening involved a famous professional athlete, known for his confidence both on and off the field. He joined Carson to promote a new memoir, but instead of discussing sports or personal growth, he drifted into stories filled with stereotypes he chalked up to locker room humor. The studio froze. His comments landed with a thud, outdated, dismissive, and surprisingly tone-deaf for someone accustomed to the public eye. Johnny reacted instantly. Though subtly, he leaned back, folded his arms, and raised his eyebrows in a way longtime viewers recognized as a signal. This is not acceptable. He then cracked a quick, clever line that redirected the conversation toward the guest's athletic achievements, effectively shutting down the offensive thread. The next day, newspapers criticized the athlete's remarks, calling them insensitive and unnecessary. Fans wrote in expressing shock that someone so admired could sound so out of step with the times. Carson never publicly addressed the moment, but insiders later admitted that the host was disappointed, noting privately that some people still don't understand the responsibility of being in the spotlight. Another widely discussed moment came when a popular musician famous for wild stories and unpredictable interviews took the stage. At first, the conversation was light and humorous until he began describing his world travels. What should have been a fun segment quickly turned sour as he slipped into broad generalizations about different ethnic groups, masking them as harmless cultural observations. Carson's smile faded. His posture stiffened. Even the audience stopped laughing rather than let the remarks continue. Johnny used one of his trademark techniques, gentle confrontation wrapped in humor. He leaned forward and, with impeccable timing, delivered a line that both corrected the musician and reminded him that millions were watching. It was subtle, but everyone understood his message. The musician tried to laugh it off, but the tension was unmistakable. Entertainment. Writers later described the interview as one of Carson's toughest tests, noting how skillfully he managed to rein in the moment without humiliating the guest. Critics, however, were not as kind. They called the musician's words careless and insensitive, sparking conversations about how entertainers must adapt when speaking to diverse audiences. Despite the controversy, Carson maintained his composure and professionalism, allowing the interview to continue, but keeping a firm hand on the direction. It was a masterclass in live hosting, a delicate dance between protecting the audience, the show, and even the guest from deeper embarrassment. As the years passed, and The Tonight Show became a nightly habit for millions of Americans, Johnny Carson found himself increasingly stuck in the middle of cultural battles. He never asked to fight. The show was meant to be light-hearted comedy, music, fun interviews, but the world was changing fast. Issues of race, politics, and identity were evolving, and not every guest who walked onto that famous stage was prepared to evolve with them. By the 1970s, some guests brought views so shocking that even Johnny struggled to maintain his signature calm, polite smile. One of the worst moments happened when a famous radio host appeared on the show. He was known for his tell-it-like-it-is attitude, but what he delivered that evening was far worse. The man openly mocked minorities right there on Carson's stage, assuming his jokes would get laughs. But the studio audience fell silent. Carson's face tightened. His laughter died mid-smile, and for the first time in years, he cut a segment short. After the show, NBC executives warned the guest never to return. Johnny simply said, "Ignorance isn't funny." It was one of the rare moments he made his feelings clear. Another unforgettable encounter came from a controversial sports figure who believed his fame, protected him from criticism. He used the platform to deliver harsh, offensive remarks about players of different races, insisting he was just being honest. Johnny's expression turned visibly uncomfortable as he tried to change the subject, but the guest wouldn't stop. When the interview finally ended, Carson told staff backstage that he hoped viewers understood the show did not support those views. NBC quietly agreed never to book the athlete again. Then there was the actor whose career was already fading. Hoping to revive his popularity, he resorted to outrageous, racially insensitive jokes, assuming any publicity was good publicity. But Carson was unimpressed. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. Instead, he responded with calm, pointed remarks that made it clear the actor had crossed a line. Within days, critics hammered the guest in newspapers, calling his performance an embarrassing reminder of how out of touch some entertainers truly are. One of the most shocking incidents involved a well-known comedian who thought he could push boundaries by making jokes about ethnic communities. His timing, delivery, and overall energy made it clear he wasn't experimenting with edgy humor, he was targeting people. Carson gave him every chance to shift direction, but the guest refused. After the show, Johnny supposedly told his producers, "Book better. America deserves better." There was also a political commentator whose appearance became infamous in Tonight Show history. Instead of discussing policies or current events, he went on a tirade insulting multiple racial groups. Carson attempted to shut him down with humor, but the guest kept escalating. NBC phones lit up with complaints before the show even finished airing. That man was never seen on the show again. Johnny's patience was tested again when a best-selling author appeared and delivered what many viewers described as thinly veiled racism packaged as intellectualism. He used big words, calm tones, and polished phrases, but the message underneath was the same: superiority. Carson dismantled him politely but firmly, turning the audience against the guest with well-timed questions that exposed his contradictions. And finally, one of the most uncomfortable episodes came when an iconic musician beloved by fans, but privately known for crude behavior, made racially offensive jokes between songs. The band laughed nervously while Carson looked visibly embarrassed. When the musician returned from the break, Johnny reshaped the conversation completely, focusing on music and refusing to engage with anything inappropriate. After that night, the musician was quietly scrubbed from the show's future plans. These 7 guests taught Johnny Carson something he never forgot: fame doesn't equal decency, and not everyone deserves a microphone. While most people remember Carson for his charm, wit, and effortless humor, moments like these revealed his true character. He protected his audience, upheld dignity, and refused to let hatred hide behind the excuse of entertainment. As the show entered its final decades, Johnny Carson had become more than just a TV icon. He was a symbol of late-night comfort. Families trusted him, viewers felt safe with him, and Johnny understood the responsibility that came with that trust. So when guests with hateful or racially offensive views slipped through the cracks, he made sure those moments did not define what The Tonight Show stood for. Behind the scenes, he quietly reshaped how the show handled controversial personalities, ensuring that decency always came before shock value. One of the biggest shifts happened after a notorious filmmaker appeared on the show. His movies were known for stirring controversy, but Carson never expected the guest to bring that antagonism to the couch. During the interview, the filmmaker made insensitive remarks about minority groups in Hollywood, claiming they couldn't handle real competition. Carson didn't clap back with anger. Instead, he used wit. He asked calm, pointed questions that exposed the weakness in the man's arguments, leaving the guest visibly uncomfortable. Critics praised Carson the next morning for educating without lecturing. The guest, however, was never invited again. Another unforgettable moment involved a businessman who had grown wealthy from a product he marketed using racist stereotypes. Many viewers didn't realize it until he shamelessly bragged about it on the show. Carson's expression changed instantly. He tried multiple times to steer the conversation away, giving the man opportunities to redeem himself, but the guest kept doubling down. After the show, Johnny told producers, "That's not the kind of laughter America needs." NBC quietly banned the businessman from future appearances. By the 1980s, Carson had refined an art form. Most hosts never mastered shutting down offensive behavior with subtle, surgical precision. One night, an actress came on promoting a film, but instead launched into a bizarre rant about keeping Hollywood pure, using language so outdated the audience winced. Johnny handled it with remarkable professionalism, gently correcting her while making sure viewers understood he didn't share her beliefs. When the show ended, the actress reportedly apologized privately, admitting she didn't realize her comments would sound so harsh. Carson accepted the apology, but she was never booked again. Then there was a stand-up comic known for crossing lines. Producers expected edgy humor but not outright racism. Mid-interview, he began mocking racial groups using crude accents. Carson's face froze. Instead of laughing along, he sat back, folded his arms, and let silence do the talking. The studio audience stopped laughing immediately. The guest grew visibly rattled, realizing he had misread the room completely. Industry insiders still say it was the moment that stalled his career. One of the most chilling nights came when a former political advisor appeared and began pushing fear-based rhetoric about immigrants. He spoke calmly, almost academically, but the message was unmistakable. Carson didn't let him get away with it. With measured questions and firm clarity, Johnny dismantled the man's talking points piece by piece, exposing them as exaggerated and harmful. Viewers applauded Carson's restraint and his intelligence. Carson's ability to handle harmful guests wasn't just about protecting viewers. It was also about preserving the integrity of the show. He believed The Tonight Show was supposed to bring people together, not divide them. Whenever a controversial guest crossed the line, Johnny made sure their behavior didn't overshadow the show's legacy. By the time he retired, Carson had built a behind-the-scenes system where producers carefully filtered potential guests. Anyone with a public reputation for hateful statements or extremist behavior was automatically flagged. Johnny didn't need drama to earn ratings. He needed respect, relatability, and a connection with everyday Americans. That's what kept him beloved for 3 decades. Even today, clips of those old episodes remind people of something important. The world may change, trends may come and go, but dignity never goes out of style. Johnny Carson proved that humor can be gentle, kindness can be firm, and a late-night host can take a stand without ever raising his voice. His handling of these 7 guests remains proof that respect will always outshine hate, especially under the bright lights of a stage watched by millions.